Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is The Other Thing I Do. My guest this week is kind of a big deal. Athina Rachel Tsangari, a filmmaker who played a crucial role in the recent Greek New Wave. Well, several roles, actually. She designed a number of projections and displays for major national events, including the 2004 Athens Olympics. She produced Yorgos Lanthimos' Kineta, Dogtooth, and Alps, among other films, and she wrote and directed the remarkable Attenberg Chevalier. Last year, Athina directed Attenberg's Ariane Labed in Trigonometry, a charming dramedy about a London couple who find themselves seriously attracted to their new boarder. The series aired on the BBC earlier this year and arrived on CBC Gem in Canada earlier this month. You should check it out. It's pretty good. Athina chose Atlantics, Mati Diop's quietly fantastical drama about a young woman named Ava, played by Mama Sane, whose lover Suleiman, played by Ibrahima Traoré, leaves her behind to find work in Europe and never returns. And though Ava seems fated to marry another man, she can't quite let Suleiman go, possibly because her grief is too profound to shake, and possibly because he's literally haunting her. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I love the hybridity of it and the in-betweenness. You know, it's not, you know, it's in a way like all of Mati's work, you know, between fiction and non-fiction. And what I admire the most in it is the way she, you know, she took like a universal issue, you know, which is like the migrant story, and she couched it in a genre movie.
Yeah, and it's a genre movie that tricks you into receiving it as a genre movie too, right? Because it doesn't tip its hat for about 45 minutes, really, that is where it's going.
Exactly. So, you know, I find this quite genius, you know, that she starts her story in a certain way, and then suddenly it becomes like a ghost story, a zombie story, while at the same time it's so political, and at the same time it's, you know, a heartbreaking love story. You know, how does one do this? And I mean, to me, you know, I had seen her short films, and, you know, the initial short film, Atlantique, 10 years ago. And it's, you know, I think it's impressive and a good example, I think, for me on how you take something that, you know, you want to talk about, and you just keep layering it. So it's the layers, you know, that it keeps peeling, is that, you know, what I'm really fascinated with. And also the fact that, you know, she did field work, you know, so she did her work. You know, she's half, you know, Senegalese by origin, you know, but she's a French filmmaker who grew up in Paris. So, you know, the fact that she went to Dakar and she you know, she did street casting. She found all of her actors, most of her actors, in the street. And, you know, it's actually really moving to me because I met Mati in Cambridge. In Boston. You know, I was teaching at Harvard and she had the Radcliffe Fellowship. And we met there and, you know, we were kind of like mutual fans of each other's work and we became friends. And, you know, that's when she was writing Atlantique. So it was, you know, to me, it's really moving to suddenly, you know, to sort of like know the process of how a script is being developed and suddenly becomes this event on the screen.
Yes.
I saw the film in Toronto, actually.
Oh, not at Cannes.
No, it wasn't in Cannes. But I was in Toronto this last edition. I was part of the platform jury. So I was, you know, it was great to see it with Mati there. And yeah, you know, not only I'm impressed, but I really think that it's it's a film that I would like to show all of my students on how you take something that is personal and universal, political, at the same time very sensual, and all of it under the guise of a genre film.
It's
And all of that, as a female biracial filmmaker.
yeah. It it has a, I was going to say there's a seductive quality in the way that it sort of tricks you into taking its next steps with it.
Mm-hmm.
She really does lead the viewer into the, first it's a mystery, then it's a supernatural mystery, or paranormal, some other sort of aspect of it. But it struck me, I watched it again last night, just to prep for this, and there's that little tiny moment. It's not even a perspective shift. It's just a moment where the movie suddenly gets so much wider when Ada comes home and is just told casually, "Oh no, Suleiman left. They're gone. Mm-hmm. They've all just gone." And this entire section of the film disappears. It's removed from us. But that also expands the world by creating the migrant story, by adding in, it's not just going to be about this little town. It's not just going to be about this cluster of women and their boyfriends or husbands. It's going to be about the absence. Mm-hmm. It's perfect. It's genius. But not to see it, not to have a goodbye. He doesn't say anything to her.
It just disappears, which is exactly, she did cinematically what in the perfect way and unceremoniously. Exactly the same way, suddenly they disappear and they're claimed by the ocean.
Yeah.
And the return in the film, the constant return to the ocean, or the fact that in the sound, she always has the ocean as this subliminal texture.
Yeah.
In all of the soundtrack.
And there's this.
So you think that you're gonna watch a love story, like a Romeo and Juliet kind of story between those two lovers, while she's being married to someone else. Then it becomes, the typical, not typical, but kind of like, okay, I'm gonna see a migrant story about the, all of these men, who travel the ocean to get to Europe.
Yeah, and on that, it's also, you can think, oh, that's great. She's telling the story from the perspective of the people who don't leave. I've never seen this before. I've never seen this treatment of the story before. It's a new angle. That's impressive. And then, no, that's not where this is going at all. This is just completely other. And that moment, and again, there's that, it's that moment maybe 45 minutes in or 50 minutes in where the women just get up and walk. And it's unnerving. I remember the first time I saw it, I was just, the whole room gasped. Nobody knows, because it doesn't look right. There's nothing in the film that prepared you for that tactic. The way they walk with the stiff legs and the arms flat out. It's wrong. And again, the whole film pivots, and you can just feel your perspective shaking because the movie isn't behaving. The movie's not doing what it's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. But it is. It absolutely, watching it again, it absolutely is. It's setting all of it up because she's been doing the things you said, the soundtrack cues, and she's been bringing it towards this moment. And when that happens, the film just sort of sharpens into a point, and that's where we are now. And there's subtle things.
There is a liberating freedom. She's really not apologetic or even self-conscious, and I think there is a sense of economy. It's risky what she did, because at any moment, if you don't do it right, if you don't have this kind of balance, this sense of economy that Mati has in all of her work, and I know that she's a very hard critic of herself, and a perfectionist. So, at any moment, if she lost that balance, there was a risk to become, gratuitous or too eclectic or, pedantic or indulgent or. But that's why, this I was reading actually before we got on the call the article that Dennis Lim wrote for Film Comment. And he talks about, I think that's the right way to describe in general Mati's work, this in-betweenness. Where, it's kind of like there's this shifting sand under your feet, as a viewer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her previous films.
The shorts I have seen.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Yeah.
There's a word in English, liminal.
Liminal.
That's that thing. It's the not the perspective, the precipice between one thing and another. It's the boundary when something exists only in that space. That's where it comes from. It always makes me think of twilight or dawn, where the light is just starting to come through, or the darkness is just starting to take over. And so much of her work exists in there because I think that's what fascinates her. Why would she tell us what's going on explicitly? Why would she? That would just let if we find out through the character's experience, then it's so much more involving.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's again, it's a feat of not just economy but also of her passionate and very intimate understanding of her characters. Because you really feel for all of them, so it's not an exercise in style. It's not a dry treatise on the eternal story of the migrant narrative. You just feel for all of these girls, particularly the girls. And it reminds me, and for the poor detective, who suddenly he's trying to investigate something, then he gets possessed by the thing that he's trying to solve. It's, how amazing is that?
That's a movie in itself.
It's almost Lynchian.
And it doesn't help either. That's right. It doesn't resolve anything for him. It just makes it more incomprehensible.
And
that's a film in itself. If you wanted to, you could actually tell that story from his perspective. But sorry, you were about to say something.
And the girls who stay behind. It really, and I'm not sure if it's something that Mati had read. I don't remember if we had discussed that back then, but it's like the Trojan women, the tragedy by Aeschylus. So it's it's sort of like the power of a group of women taking action, in the absence of the men, and taking revenge. It's a primordial story. And I love the way she has retold it in such a modern way. I guess that's what it is. It's a very modern film without being academically experimental.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know what I mean? To be able to actually do something that takes so many risks in terms of form and content, and at the same time to be a film that appeals to a large audience. Netflix bought it, and it was shown, it streamed, and people who normally wouldn't see a film like that saw it and loved it. So it's also a triumph of how personal cinema can become commercial cinema.
Yeah, it's true. I would not have thought that this film would appeal to Netflix. I suppose once critical buzz started, they do have that thing where they're courting the Oscars. They would very much like to win as many as possible, and I think they saw it as having a shot for foreign language film. And so maybe that was the gambit. But it's an unlikely title for them. They tend to like things with shooting and swords and yelling and broad comedy, and this doesn't care about any of those aspects. It just really only wants to tell Ada's story and be there and occupy the space. The way that the camera just fixes on people's faces and bodies.
Yeah.
And doesn't care what else is going on. I love the way that it's obviously part of it is just a visual effect choice, but to push the building away. Reason that everything is happening, it's there all the time. We can never get away from it, but we never get a really clear look at it. It's not that important to her. For Ada, it represents all of the reasons she's lost her lover.
Exactly.
And it's just not important.
It's the specter. The specter of, I guess, capitalism.
Yeah, and as you say, it is absolutely a 21st century narrative in that money drives everything, including suffering and sorrow. I mean, of course, but every decision is made based on what the yield will be, what the value is in the future, and it's including Ada's future, which is decided by other people, not by her. She's told she can't marry the poor man and has to marry the man with better standing, but then that choice is taken away from her when Suleiman leaves. And I don't know that Isa is a bad person exactly. He doesn't seem too terrible. He's just not her true love, and so that's where my brain is trying to process it from that side of the story, the Romeo and Juliet thing you'd mentioned, and that again, that's not what she cares about. That's not where this movie is going.
Exactly.
I can't think of, maybe a handful of films have pulled that off as well. To just pull the rug out from under you completely and tell you that the thing you've been watching isn't the thing you've been watching.
Can you think of one right now? Just.
There's. What am I thinking of? I'm thinking of heist movies. I'm thinking of, The Prestige and films like that, where the only point of it is the twist.
Great movie.
It's fun, but it's not, it doesn't linger in the same way.
I remember actually really enjoying that exactly because, there is I love cinema that's so visceral, where basically, your entire body reacts to it.
Yeah.
It's like, and the thing with Atlantique is that it is poetic and it's visceral and it's a ghost story and it's also an ethnographic film and it's a tragedy, but at the same time it's, entertaining, It becomes a zombie film. What?
It is, yeah, it's true. But a fun one, right? It's not. There's that moment of disconcerting horror, but once it resolves and it, after the women all sprint across the road, they just sit down and talk to someone. It refuses to be a horror movie again. It just goes back to being observational. And the zombie elements aren't traditional classical zombies. It's more about what would happen if you came back from the dead. You'd probably be really sad. It's the speech at the end, that your eyes stayed with me. The sense of heartbreak. And
also, the whole idea of the double. I love movies with double, the idea of the double. Whether that's Vertigo, whether it's
what was I going to say? Dressed to Kill, things like that. The body,
exactly.
The classic, the doppelganger fake out.
Yeah, De Palma. I just love it. There's something, I guess, very psychoanalytical about it. You can't avoid that. So the fact that she actually, sleeps with Suleiman through the detective. How beautiful is that?
Yeah, it's true, and still Lynchian, as because you have that wonderful. Anytime anybody brings in overheated emotion and fantasy, that it becomes Lynchian, I think. But she doesn't. She creates her own language for it, her own lexicon.
And her own tone. I think it is a matter of tone. You know, it's not so much, I mean, you know, more than a century later, I mean, I'm not sure how we can talk about new language in cinema, but I'm fascinated by the endless inventions and nuances of tone. So, you know, it's not like whether you shoot something handheld or, you know, you use cranes or whatever, and it's not whether you use the tropes of horror or noir or the lighting or whatever, but it's the individual tone that I think creates auteur cinema.
Yeah. It's not so much a language as an accent, I think. It's just the way you express it. I mean, you did it with Attenberg in the first 5 minutes, where I remember sitting there and thinking, oh, this is new. I haven't seen this. I don't know what this is. I don't know what to make of it. And then the film shows you how to interpret it, and we are led to understand it. And by the end of the film, it's like, yep, I get it. You know, it took 93 minutes to learn a new language, but it's not that hard, because we do have this built-in understanding of how to interpret things. It's funny, we just recently, Semicellist brought the writer onto the podcast, and we talked about the hybrid nature of Chloe Zhao and how she tells her stories.
Right, yeah.
And it's not dissimilar, is it? Because the landscapes and the interaction of people in that space are all just as essential. But yeah, I think after 100 years of cinema, we figured out how to interpret. As long as the director knows what she's doing, I can understand the larger intent. You know, and it comes back. I think you're right. I think it comes back to tone and the confidence, right, that the film has, that I don't start to double think, to start to second guess what it is that's going on. And Atlantics she's so good at creating that, at casting that spell, that just making me lean in instead of away to see what happens next.
And we're talking actually about the similarities with Chloe Zhao's work.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think there's actually a kinship, and I think they're kind of like maybe, you know, almost in the same generation of filmmakers who, you know, work a lot with real stories.
Yeah.
And real people as the characters. I mean, Mati actually did casting. They're actors, but they're, you know, non-actors.
Right.
So that's and you know, it's not implausible that her actress could be Ada at any moment of her real life. So yeah, I think that it's almost like a school, you know. It's kind of like it's not new, because, you know, the idea of doing almost this kind of, you know, cinéma vérité fictional films is not a new thing, but I think it has come back in a very fresh and modern way.
Yeah. We're rediscovering the potential somehow, right, of what it is to take a hybrid story.
And also, you know, I really appreciate the dedication, the commitment to field work. You know, like Chloe spent many years. I mean, she was a fellow when I was at Sundance at the screenwriters, at the directors lab.
Oh yeah.
So I actually met her, you know, when she was developing her first script, her first film.
Oh, Songs My Brother Taught Me.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so I was really impressed by, you know, she was very young. She had just, I think, graduated from NYU, and she was just doing her work. You know, she was in, I don't remember where it's taking place.
South Dakota.
South Dakota, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, she was there in the reservation, and, you know, months after months, and stitching her story and finding her characters and finding her cast and living there. You know, there's a commitment. It's not like you write something that you don't know about and then you just go, you do your production in a couple of months and you leave. I know it's a similar process that Mati did. She was there for a couple of years.
Really, in Dakar?
In Dakar, yeah. Not continuously, but, she was committed, not just to go and do a surface job just because she's entitled to her origins. That really shouldn't be enough.
I mean, the film is not a work of tourism. She's absolutely, she's got the textures and she's got the rhythms
from inside.
Yeah.
And the identification herself. I mean, I felt like Mati was part of Ada. Yeah.
Which part would you? I mean, you know her better than I, so I'm always curious about this.
I just felt like she completely understood that character. I felt like it was there was an identification there. There was a sort of like a camaraderie. So it's good to feel like, as a director, that the way you are with your cast or with your characters, it's part of an extended family. This is the sense that I got, and I think that's why it's so effective, because it felt that she was just part of that gang.
Just sort of walking alongside them, catching what was happening.
And also, you can imagine that, she had danced with them, and she had chatted with them, and she had, shared stories with them. It's kind of like this essence that you feel like it's like between the lines and between the frames. It's just something that you sense the intimacy and you sense the truth. And
the rapport that's formed.
Yeah. And also, the rapport with your own film. I'm not sure how to explain this, but it's, as a filmmaker, it's, when I watch films, I'm not quite like the, whatever innocent viewer. I always question, and I question what I feel and what I don't feel, and how much I let go and how much I don't.
Sure, yeah, so, I know that well.
I remember, watching it in the midst of a really huge audience in Toronto, and I felt that intimacy in the viewers, in the audience. So that's a triumph, the triumph of intimacy and of truth. And truth in something that, you never know what is real and what is not real and what is false and what is not, I think that's incredible how to be able to do that. And there's only a handful of directors who actually, Hitchcock being one of them, or Lynch, for example.
Yeah. It's I think the understanding of mystery, right? We're presented with something that we want to solve.
Yeah.
And the film just denies us that as long as it possibly can.
Exactly.
To pull us closer, to draw us in.
Mm-hmm. Or, Chantal Akerman is another example of that.
So
she's in, she's the, what do you call that? The inheritor?
Heir? The heir?
Yeah, heir, you could say.
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's that space that she creates in, it's in Jeanne Dielman, but it's also in, it's in all of her films, really. But that space where we're allowed to watch someone and scrutinize them, to really just look closer.
Yeah, and also like the most, journal films by Akerman, like Letters from Home.
Oh, her own work, yeah.
Yeah.
Or like her autobiographical stuff, documentaries. It's a mystery that we want to... it's not even a mystery that we want to solve. It's just a personality or a psyche that we want to understand. I think, for me. It's the empathy impulse. I just want to know why.
So you are interested in empathy when you watch a film?
I think so. I think I naturally want that.
Even if you watch blockbusters?
It's harder, I will admit. But yeah, I think
that's the missing ingredient in blockbusters.
I think
empathy.
So. I think
empathy not only when you're a 14-year-old boy.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I'm sure they feel plenty of empathy.
Yes. Well, we're about the same age, and I was raised on Jaws, and I was raised on Close Encounters, films that are, huge American entertainment machines, but also that center human beings in their stories.
Oh man, totally.
Yeah, and Jaws only by accident, right? Because the shark didn't work, and they had to come up with something to do for the first hour. But it's brilliant. It's genius.
Yeah.
And of all the things, amazingly enough, as far as blockbusters go, I think the Marvel movies have done not consistently, but some of them, when they do it right, they'll cast an actor who can carry that and give you, Downey or Paul Rudd, even in the Ant-Man films. He's a great physical presence, but he's also a fun emotional connection for the audience. Definitely. To try to care a little.
Yeah, what a great actor he is.
Rudd or Downey? Or both, really?
Both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that does give me the investment that I think makes it all the difference.
Yeah.
And now, of course, we were just talking about this, so Semi and I were talking about this on her episode, and Chloe Zhao is directing a Marvel movie. She's directing The Eternals.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, see, it all makes sense.
It's insane.
I think it's like really, whoever thought of that, that gives me so much hope, for the future of cinema, because, to have Chloe direct, a blockbuster, and bring that kind of empathy and bring that kind of, detailed character study that she does, and at the same time, she's a very visual director. So great. More of that should happen. More women and more directors in general are coming from non calling card films, because I'm sure she didn't make her films thinking, oh, with this, I'm going to be called, by Marvel.
Yeah, that's the end goal of any filmmaker now.
Yeah. Not really, but...
No, but as though it were. I mean, because now it is a possible pathway. The person who wrote the Black Widow movie directed The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby, which was one of my favorite American films of the last decade.
I haven't seen that, actually.
Yeah, neither had Semi. It's Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy, Bill Hader, Kieran Hines. Who else is in it? I'll email you the details.
I wonder why it went under my radar.
Harvey.
Oh.
If only I pushed him into the canal that one time we were both in Vienna.
Norman.
I know, it's my own failing.
Terrible.
But then Ned Benson goes dark and no one hears from him for several years, and then he shows up as the screenwriter of the Black Widow movie. It just happened.
Wow.
It's a weird place. But this is where we are now.
You yourself should be an Avenger. I think film critics sometimes should be Avengers.
Oh, we'd be terrible superheroes. We'd just be pointing out logical flaws in the monsters.
Yeah, what a waste. What a waste of
talent.
Of talent or work.
Yes, potential. No, we're all the Punisher. That's the worst part. We all think we're Iron Man, but we're really just the crazy person in the corner. That's how I feel. It's on a good day. But so did you want to talk about Ozark? You had mentioned it, and I'm still trying to figure out how they fit together. You're welcome to. If
Ozark. Oh my God.
You had mentioned it as a connection, and I'm not sure how.
I mean, I know it's like against your rules because it's supposed to be one and supposed to be a film.
You can bring it in.
It's only because I watched it very recently. It was shot in the Atlanta area. So, and everyone has been saying lately, you have to watch Ozark, So I binged it like crazy, to the point of like self-starvation. I just couldn't stop. And my partner just like gave up on me, just left me on the sofa. I thought it might be interesting to it's not comparing, it's just, these are both stories about possession. You become possessed by a force, an invisible force, which is omnipotent and it's ever present. So I thought, it was kind of interesting. You have like, the possessed people who have been left behind in Dakar or, all over the world. And basically mourning or resisting this absence or negotiating it or avenging it. And then, in Ozark, you also have a different kind of possession because, I've never seen... it almost has the structure of a video game.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, it has a series of bosses and a series of...
Oh my God, it's like
peaks and valleys.
Every scene there's a new obstacle, and one of the heroes, has to surpass his obstacle. And then there is a new obstacle and a new hurdle, and a new obstacle, a new hurdle, and a new, a new skill that you have to develop. And all of this happens, in a state of possession because these people are possessed. This family, I mean, it's insane, and it's sort of like this possession, which is for survival and to actually, beat the enemy, whatever this enemy is, that premise of the drug cartel, who is everywhere.
Yeah, it's the classic. I mean, I think it comes very quickly on the heels of Breaking Bad, right, where every season ended with a new cliffhanger because that was the elevation of stakes, the escalation of the problem.
Right.
It feels very similar. But Ozark strikes me as one where it's contagious, right? It's not just Walter White, it's everybody.
Exactly.
By the end of this,
Yeah, and I think that's the triumph of it. What an exquisite, extraordinary ensemble cast. And also, I think, and I was wondering because I watched 1, 2, 3 basically in the space of embarrassingly like 3 days. So that means like 10 hours a day.
That is commitment.
Yeah, exactly. I just couldn't
it's
stop.
not like anything else.
And I'm not a binger and I don't watch very much TV. Like something has to really click with me to actually, stand in front of the TV because I'm mostly, my partner and I, are on a steady diet of films, especially now during the lockdown. So, once I started it, I was just really fascinated by this, that it's actually, I think it kind of made sense why season 3, which premiered during the lockdown, became suddenly so popular. They are in a lockdown themselves, they are in a lockdown and sheltering in place basically in the Ozark.
Yeah, trapped with each other.
So
slowly
like
turning on
something like 60-70% of the scenes are in that house. And there is this fear of contamination, of
exposure,
of exposure. But the fact that like every single of these characters is part of this, so it's not just about this one hero. I love the fact that like in season 3, it's again and kind of like connecting it with Mati's film and the Trojan women. It's all about the women, figuring out how to save the day, which I love, and he, he's kind of, it starts with him mostly as the hero, and then in the end, he's just kind of like on the sideline. And in his kind of like nerdy way, trying to save his family. But I love the fact that, they don't shy away from having the women being the baddies, basically.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Bateman has that really interesting energy where he's never an alpha. He may convince himself he is, but
Yeah.
There's just something about his whole persona.
He's really an incredible actor.
Yeah, I think it's
and
remarkable that he's figured out how to use that to his advantage.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of his. Because, how do you make someone who is like alpha and beta at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
And also without being, non-act dramatic. Talking about tone, right? Which is incredible. Which again, it's not completely insane that I wanted to talk about Ozark and Atlantique at the same time, because they really own their tone. They take something, people say it's like Breaking Bad. But it's not.
No, only the premise, really.
It just pushes the envelope in terms of tone, because there is, everything, like the music, the intonation of the delivery of the lines. It's like there is no drama there. I mean, they're about to get killed every single second. And there is like not a dramatic bone in their body, in the way they deliver that story, the way they deliver those lines. Every single character, to the point where, as I said, it's like a video game, and sometimes like a Beckettian theater of the absurd.
Yeah, and it never winks. Like, it never betrays its tone.
No, never.
You're right, it's an absolute consistency.
Yeah. I just directed my first series, Trigonometry.
Trigonometry, yes, which I really enjoyed.
Thank you. And, to sort of like maintain this kind of tone, and we were two directors. So, I can't even imagine how it would be, two directors, 8 episodes, 1 season. I can't even imagine how you maintain that kind of consistency, coherence in the writing, in the visual language and in the tone, with all these different directors. So, there must be some really great show running there.
Yeah, well, and Bateman has directed a number of the episodes himself, right? So there's that too. It comes back to that sense of trust in the ensemble. And I was going to say, for Trigonometry, you and Ariane have worked together before, and that has to make it easier. Just to know what each other is, not just to know each other personally, but to know what you're capable of, and to be able to do the give and take there. Definitely. That's got to help. Yeah,
definitely. No, it's a blessing actually to work with, and I love that, working with actors again and again. And in, especially in a TV series where everything happens in the speed of light, and you hardly have time to think. You just basically react. It was actually really good to work with Ariane again, because we really have the same code. So it's all like shorthand. And, she's an actress who doesn't really ask questions. She just does it. And she has very sharp instinct. And I don't really like giving, single answers to something. So it works out really well, and it was the same with Talisa Teixeira and Gary Carr, because they have a similar kind of instinct as actors. They just really get in there, and they become very personally committed. So you never feel like there is acting.
Yeah.
Or I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the way that you structured. I mean, the first episode was just, there are moments in that really struck me. Just that silent walk through the apartment that's a single take, where we just get to see them breathing together, and then the echo of that in the bathroom scene at the end, where all 3 characters are just trapped in a space with their own chemistry. Mm-hmm. That's hard. That's hard to act. You just have to sort of exist in that.
Yeah.
I don't want to go beyond the first episode for people who are listening, because I'm afraid.
I'm really grateful for this experience, because when you make films, and especially someone like me who is so slow, I'm like a turtle.
5 episodes of television.
Well, suddenly, to be ejected to this kind of speed, it was actually liberating. And the fact that, we were given this unprecedented almost gift of rehearsals, because I was rehearsed.
Oh.
I was rehearsed before anything I do, So the fact that our producers, Tessa Ross and Juliette Howell, they really understood that in order to actually succeed into this kind of intimacy and kinship and friendship in something that, in chemistry, it wouldn't actually work. If you don't have very much money to shoot for, many, many, many days, and that you have to shoot sometimes 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 scenes per day, I think that use of like 10 days before we started shooting was, did all the work in a way. So, by the time we went on the set, and I was very lucky to have an amazing crew, and Sean Price Williams, who is, so kinetic and so tactile with the camera. Yeah, so, again, it's all about finding the code and the tone. And I hope that we actually found something there, that then it was all about the choreography, the daily choreography of that code. It's almost like there is a dance, and you learn the steps of this dance, and in the beginning it's a little bit awkward, and then in the end you're just flying through the dance. So, that's the way we did it. And when you do it in such a beautiful union between cast and crew, that's why you make cinema, for this collective experience and, for the empathy of that experience.
Yeah. And you build a repertory company if you're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. Cassavetes, for example. It makes total sense what he did. Yeah.
My thanks to Athina Rachel Tsangari, whose new television series Trigonometry is streaming in Canada on CBC Gem right now, and I think you can still catch it in the UK on the BBC iPlayer. She may have only directed the first 5 episodes, but watch the whole thing. It's good. And then maybe check out Attenberg, which is currently streaming on the Criterion channel. Thanks also to Tanya Cavusolo. She knows what she did. Athina is not on Twitter, or at least not that I could find, but you can find Atlantics on Netflix, and it's also due to join the Criterion Collection on Blu-ray and DVD later this year. That'll be nice. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com, where I'm hosting a bunch of podcasts in addition to doing my other film stuff. Go take a look. And you can find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, say so. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you've been enjoying us. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're at it. There's some good stuff. Stay inside, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out. I'll see you next week.